In showrooms across 1960s Britain, ambition often outran engineering. Manufacturers promised comfort, prestige, innovation, and buyers believed them. Some cars delivered. Others quietly began destroying the very reputation they'd been built to earn. A blown head gasket here. A styling gamble there. A boardroom decision made in haste, paid for years later by ordinary drivers. This isn't a list of Britain's worst cars. It's a countdown of cars that had every reason to succeed and still managed to undo themselves. And by the time we reach the very end, you'll understand why one flagship never truly recovered. Number 10. Reliant Regal. The Reliant Regal promised something genuinely clever, a lightweight three-wheeler that dodged the tax and licensing costs of a full car, built from glass fiber in Tamworth. For thousands of working families, it was an affordable route onto British roads. But cleverness came with a catch. 3 wheels meant a narrow front track, and a narrow front track meant a car that leaned alarmingly through corners, sometimes further than drivers expected. Word spread quickly. Comedians joked about it. Motoring writers questioned its stability. The Regal became shorthand for a certain kind of budget compromise, no matter how genuinely practical it was for daily errands and modest journeys. What began as an ingenious solution to post-war taxation slowly hardened into a punchline. The engineering behind it, simple, cheap to run, easy to repair, barely mattered once the reputation set in. And that reputation would follow every three-wheeled Reliant for decades. Up next, a car sunk not by physics, but by a name. Number 9. Wolseley Hornet. Take a Mini, add a longer boot, an upright chrome grille and a walnut-trimmed dashboard, and you had the Wolseley Hornet, BMC's attempt to sell Issigonus's brilliant engineering to a more traditional buyer. Riley offered an identical twin, the Elf, at a slightly higher price. Motoring critics were unimpressed from the start. Small Car magazine called the pairing among the ugliest and least desirable cars offered to the British public, while writer LJK Setright dismissed buyers as snobs paying extra for the evidence of austerity wrapped in wood veneer. Even Issigonus himself complained about the added gimmicks. Beneath the badge and the chrome sat the same Mini floorpan, subframes, and engine sold cheaper elsewhere. The cars actually sold respectably, yet the press mockery stuck harder than any sales figure could. It became the era's clearest lesson: badge and veneer alone couldn't buy genuine prestige. And BMC's appetite for repeating that mistake, on a much larger scale, was only just beginning. Number 8. Ford Corsair. The Corsair arrived in 1963 with genuinely striking jet-age styling, a pointed nose, sculpted flanks. Nothing else on British roads looked quite like it. Then, in 1965, Ford fitted a new engine that undid the impression almost overnight. The Essex V4, with its unusual 60-degree cylinder angle, ran rough at idle and coarse through the rev range, whatever the advertising claimed about refinement. One tagline insisted the car was seen but not heard. Owners heard it constantly. Early versions also suffered leaking head gaskets and bearing failures, turning a striking design statement into a source of genuine frustration. Motoring writers who'd praised the styling in 1963 were, by 1966, apologizing for the engine underneath it. The car that once turned heads on Dagenham forecourts became known instead for its unsettled note at traffic lights. Ford eventually smoothed the worst of it, but the damage to the Corsair's standing was already done. The next car's downfall came from something far more physical than a rough idle. Number 7. Triumph Herald. Triumph gave the Herald something no rival offered: a separate chassis allowing an astonishingly tight turning circle, and swing-axle rear suspension for a supple, comfortable ride around town. Buyers loved the maneuverability instantly, parking became almost effortless. But swing-axle suspension carried a well-known compromise. Push the Herald hard into a corner, particularly with a heavy load in the boot, and the rear wheels could tuck under, snapping the tail out with little warning. It wasn't a fault so much as a characteristic of the design itself, one shared, uncomfortably, with contemporary rivals overseas. British motoring journalists began cautioning readers about trailing throttle oversteer, a phrase few owners had encountered before buying. The Herald sold respectably regardless, and its practicality kept loyal customers returning. Yet the whispered warnings about its cornering manners stuck to the model for years, a shadow across an otherwise clever design. Its sportier stablemate would inherit the very same trait, with consequences that proved far harder to shake off. Number 6. Hillman Imp. Roots built something genuinely ambitious to challenge the Mini, an all-aluminium, overhead camshaft engine descended from Coventry Climax racing heritage, mounted in the tail for balance and grip. On paper, it was the more sophisticated car. But Autocar's own launch road test flagged a worrying thirst for engine coolant, and insufficient airflow to the small rear-mounted radiator meant the engine ran hot with no gauge or warning light to alert drivers before damage occurred. Warped heads and blown gaskets followed, alongside troublesome automatic chokes and failing water pumps. Built at the newly opened Linwood plant in Scotland, with a workforce still finding its feet, quality control couldn't keep pace with the ambition. Sales fell to under 43,000 units by 1965, a worrying collapse so early in the car's life. Roots fixed most of it by the Mark II. The reputation, inconveniently, refused to be fixed at the same speed, and within the corporation's boardroom, the consequences were only beginning. Number 5. Jaguar Mark X. Jaguar's Mark X arrived in 1961 to announce a new era, enormous, low-slung, wrapped in curves that made every previous saloon look old-fashioned overnight. William Lyons projected annual sales near 15,000 units, with two-thirds destined for America. Independent rear suspension, a smooth six-cylinder engine, leather and walnut in genuine abundance, it should have been the flagship Jaguar deserved. Instead, American buyers who wanted a big car wanted a big engine to match, and the Mark X six-cylinder unit felt underpowered beside Detroit's V8S. British buyers, meanwhile, balked at its sheer scale. It remains one of the widest production Jaguars ever built. The Mark X quietly became associated with a rather unglamorous reputation, favored, rumor had it, by figures better avoided than admired. Lyons himself later admitted the car had grown too large. It wasn't badly engineered, it was badly judged, aimed at a customer who barely existed. And sizing misjudgments, as the next entry shows, could sink an entire model line. Number 4. Vanden Plas Princess for Litre R. Few cars carried grander ambitions than the Vanden Plas Princess for Litre R. Beneath its stately, coach-built bodywork sat a genuine Rolls-Royce Straight Six, the only mass-produced civilian car ever to use a partnership that should have guaranteed instant prestige. British buyers, understandably, expected the smoothness that Rolls-Royce badges implied elsewhere. What they found was a heavy, largely unchanged body shell wrapped around unreliability that dogged the car from the start, paired with Britain's first Borg-Warner automatic gearbox, still finding its feet. Jaguar dealers, tasked with selling it alongside their own Mark X, reportedly found it a difficult car to place. Sales surged briefly, then declined to a trickle as the unreliability took hold, until the model was quietly dropped. Just 6,555 were built before BMC's newly acquired Jaguar Influence ended the project. It remains one of the most extraordinary badge combinations in British motoring history, and one of its clearest lessons that a famous name under the bonnet cannot rescue a car that disappoints everywhere else. Before we reach the final three, if you remember any of these from a family driveway, tell us in the comments and subscribe for more forgotten British motoring history. Number 3. Austin Morris 1100. The Austin and Morris 1100 wasn't a flop, quite the opposite. Isogonus's front-wheel drive layout, hydroelastic suspension, and remarkable interior space made it Britain's best-selling car for much of the decade. Families adored it. Reviewers called it years ahead of its rivals. Yet success masked a problem that would only surface with time. British Leyland's production standards, inherited from an overstretched and financially strained corporation, meant panel gaps varied, paint protection was thin, and box sections trapped moisture without adequate sealing. Rust took hold quietly, often from the inside out, long before owners noticed anything from the driver's seat. A car bought as sensible and modern gradually revealed itself as disposable, corroding away within a handful of British winters. By the 1970s, thousands that once dominated the sales charts had simply vanished from driveways, dissolved rather than driven away. Britain's most popular car of its era became, ironically, one of its rarest survivors. And the very platform beneath it would resurface, larger and more expensive, in an entry causing bigger headaches still. Number 2. Austin 1800 Land Crab. BMC called the Austin 1800 a genuine breakthrough front-wheel drive, hydroelastic suspension, cabin space that shamed every rival, and enough engineering merit to be named Car of the Year runner-up. Autocar called it one of the most important cars in the world. It should have dominated the executive family class outright. Instead, British buyers hesitated. The styling, blunt and unapologetically utilitarian, struck many showroom visitors as plain compared with sculpted rivals from Ford and Vauxhall. Worse, BMC had misread its own market. 1960 registration showed the 1700 to 1800cc class held barely 5% share, while the smaller 1400 to 1500cc segment commanded nearly 20%. Car magazine itself questioned publicly how long BMC could allow the model's shortcomings to hold back its genuine potential. Nicknamed the Land Crab for its wide, low stance, the 1800 earned grudging respect from engineers and lasting indifference from the public. A brilliant answer, aimed squarely at a question British buyers weren't asking. And the very same underpinnings would be stretched further still, into the decade's most spectacular reputational collapse. Number 1. Austin 3 Litre. By 1968, BMC needed a flagship. What it delivered was the Austin 3 Litre, sharing its center section with the already unloved 1800, stretched to accommodate a 6-cylinder engine and self-leveling rear suspension, genuinely ahead of its time. Customers stayed away in droves. Despite the extended wheelbase, the shared floorpan and bulky transmission tunnel meant the 3-litre actually offered less usable space than the cheaper car. It was derived from an embarrassment obvious the moment buyers sat inside. It never came close to reaching the 50 cars a week break-even point BMC required. Just 9,992 were built across 3 years, against predecessors that had sold similar numbers annually for nearly a decade. The planned Wolseley version was scrapped entirely before launch. Motoring journalists who'd seen it previewed were already lukewarm. The paying public simply weren't interested at all. Killed off in 1971, it marked the quiet end of the big Austin saloon altogether. No British car of the decade promised so much prestige and delivered so little of it, a reputation that never recovered, because it barely had the chance to begin one. 10 cars, 10 very different ways of losing public trust. A rough engine here, a misjudged size there, a name that promised more than the metal beneath it could deliver. Some were genuinely clever machines undone by decisions in the boardroom rather than the workshop. Others simply arrived in the wrong shape, at the wrong moment, for buyers who'd already made up their minds. The Austin 3 Litre remains the starkest lesson of them all: ambition without an audience. Which of these would you have forgiven, and which one still stings? Let us know below, and stay with Britain Rewind for more stories British motoring would rather forget.